The station was busy that morning with people walking fast, dragging bags, and checking their phones, but everything seemed to slow down when the police dog suddenly stopped near a long wooden bench. The dog named Max stood still, his ears alert and his body tense, staring at a small blue bag resting quietly on the floor. His handler Tom felt the leash tighten and gently pulled, expecting Max to move forward as trained, but the dog refused to take even one step. Max lowered his head and pressed his nose close to the bag, breathing slowly as if trying to understand something important. Tom had worked with Max for years and trusted his instincts more than anything. This was not how Max behaved during routine patrols, and it was not a sign of distraction or confusion. A soft sound escaped from Max's throat, low and shaking, almost like a cry held back for too long. People nearby began to notice and slowed their pace, sensing that something was wrong. Some stopped completely and turned their heads, watching the unusual moment unfold. Max gently placed one paw on the handle of the bag and pulled it closer to his chest. His body curved protectively around it, and his eyes filled with emotion that could not be mistaken. The sound he made grew louder, a sad and trembling cry that echoed through the open space of the station. Tom knelt beside him, placing a calm hand on Max's back, trying to soothe him with a familiar touch. Tom spoke softly, using the same reassuring tone he always used, but Max did not respond. The dog's eyes never left the bag, and his cries continued, filled with urgency and pain. This was not training behavior, and it was not a false alert. Tom felt a tight weight settle in his chest as he realized that Max was reacting to something deeply emotional. A small crowd slowly formed around them, keeping a respectful distance. Among the faces stood a little girl, no older than 8, wearing a faded jacket that looked too thin for the cold morning air. Her name was Mia, and her hands were clenched tightly around the edge of her sleeves. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen and red, and silent tears slid down her cheeks as she watched the scene. Mia had been standing there for a while, unnoticed at first, afraid to move closer. When she saw the dog crying, her lips trembled, and her breath caught in her throat. She recognized the blue bag immediately, and her heart began to race. That bag had been with her since early morning, and losing it had left her feeling empty and scared. Tom noticed the girl standing there and gently raised a hand to signal calm to the people around. He turned toward her and spoke carefully, asking if she knew anything about the bag. Mia tried to speak, but no sound came out. She nodded slightly, then shook her head, confused and overwhelmed by emotion. Her eyes never left the bag, and fresh tears rolled down her face. Max lifted his head and looked directly at Mia. His crying softened into a quiet whine, and his tail moved slowly against the floor. He nudged the bag gently toward her but kept his paw on it, as if unsure whether to let go. The connection between the dog and the girl was sudden and powerful, and everyone watching could feel it. Mia took a small step forward, then stopped, afraid to scare the dog. Her hands shook as she reached out slightly, not touching the bag, just hovering near it. Her breathing became uneven, and she whispered something under her breath, words too quiet for anyone else to hear. Tom watched closely, sensing that this moment mattered more than any procedure or rule. The station felt silent now, even though people were still present. The sounds of footsteps and voices faded into the background as all attention focused on the dog, the bag, and the crying child. Max leaned closer to Mia, his eyes filled with trust and sorrow, as if he understood her pain completely. He pressed his nose against the bag again and gave one last soft cry. Tom felt his throat tighten as he realized that Max was not guarding the bag because of danger, but because of meaning. Whatever was inside the bag carried a weight that only the dog seemed to understand. Mia wiped her face with her sleeve and looked at Tom with pleading eyes, silently asking for permission. Tom nodded gently, encouraging her to come closer. Mia knelt slowly on the floor, careful not to make sudden movements. Max watched her closely but did not pull away. When her fingers brushed the handle of the bag, Max relaxed slightly, though he stayed close, resting his head near her hands. Mia finally broke down, her quiet tears turning into shaking sobs. She pressed her forehead against the bag and held it tightly, as if afraid it might disappear again. Max stayed beside her, calm and protective, his presence offering comfort in a way words never could. The people around them stood still, many wiping their eyes, realizing they were witnessing something rare and deeply human. No one knew yet what was inside the bag, but everyone could feel its importance. The bond between the dog and the little girl had already told a powerful story. Whatever the bag held had brought them together for a reason that could not be ignored. The little girl stayed kneeling on the cold station floor, holding the blue bag close to her chest as if it were the only solid thing left in her world. Her shoulders shook as she cried, and Max remained beside her, his body pressed gently against her side. Tom watched quietly, giving her time, knowing this moment could not be rushed or interrupted. The people around them stood still, feeling that something important was about to be revealed. After a while, Mia's breathing slowly calmed, though tears still ran down her face. She lifted her head and looked at Tom with eyes full of fear and hope mixed together. Tom knelt down to her level and spoke softly, asking if she felt safe and if she could tell him about the bag. Mia nodded slowly, tightening her grip on the handle before answering. She explained that the bag belonged to her family and that she had carried it with her all morning. Her voice was small and shaky, but her words were clear enough to understand. She said the bag held the last things that reminded her of home and the people she loved. When she lost sight of it in the crowd, her heart had dropped, and she felt like she had lost everything again. Max listened closely, his ears slightly tilted, as if every word mattered. When Mia spoke about losing the bag, Max let out a soft sound, almost like a sigh. He nudged the bag gently with his nose, reassuring her without needing to speak. Tom felt a deep respect for his partner, realizing the dog had sensed the pain long before anyone else noticed. Tom asked Mia where her family was now, keeping his tone calm and gentle. Mia hesitated, then lowered her eyes to the floor before answering. She said she was traveling with her aunt, who had gone to ask for help nearby. She had been told to stay close to the bench and wait, but fear had made the time feel endless. The crowd around them slowly began to move back, giving the girl space and privacy. A few people whispered quietly, while others watched in silence, deeply moved by the scene. Max stayed alert but calm, his body language protective yet peaceful. The bag rested between him and Mia, no longer a mystery but a symbol of comfort and connection. Tom carefully asked if Mia would like to open the bag. Mia looked surprised at the question, then frightened, as if she were unsure if she was ready. She held the bag closer and shook her head at first, then paused, taking a deep breath. After a moment, she nodded, deciding it was time. Her hands trembled as she slowly unzipped the bag. Max leaned closer, watching carefully, his nose twitching as the contents were revealed. Inside were neatly folded clothes, a small blanket, and a soft toy worn from years of love. Mia picked up the toy and pressed it against her face, fresh tears falling as memories rushed back to her. She explained that the toy had belonged to her younger brother, who used to sleep with it every night. Her voice broke as she spoke, but she continued, needing to let the story out. The clothes in the bag had belonged to her parents, saved because they smelled like home and safety. The blanket had wrapped all of them together during long nights when they had nowhere else to go. Max lowered his head and rested it gently on Mia's knee, offering silent comfort. Tom felt his chest tighten as he listened, understanding now why Max had reacted so strongly. The dog had not sensed danger but loss and longing, emotions that left deep marks even without words. This was something training alone could never teach. Mia carefully placed the items back into the bag, treating each one with respect and care. She zipped it closed and hugged it tightly again, her small arms wrapped around it. Max placed his paw softly on the bag once more, but this time there was no tension in his body. His job was done, and the bag was where it belonged. Tom reassured Mia that she was safe now and that her aunt would be found soon. He used his radio to quietly request assistance, making sure the situation was handled with care. Max stayed by Mia's side, refusing to move away, as if he had chosen her as someone worth protecting. Minutes passed slowly, but the heavy feeling in the air began to lift. Mia's breathing steadied, and her crying softened into quiet sniffles. She reached out and gently touched Max's fur, hesitant at first, then more confident. Max responded by wagging his tail slowly, accepting her touch as a promise of trust. When Mia smiled faintly for the first time that day, the people nearby felt a sense of relief. It was a small smile, fragile and tired, but real. Tom noticed it and felt hope rise inside him. Moments like this reminded him why he chose this job and why he trusted Max with his life. Footsteps approached, and a woman hurried through the crowd, her face filled with worry. Mia looked up and recognized her aunt, calling out softly. The woman rushed forward and knelt beside Mia, wrapping her in a tight embrace. Tears of relief flowed freely as she thanked Tom and looked at Max with gratitude. Max watched the reunion calmly, his eyes warm and gentle. He finally stepped back, satisfied that the girl was no longer alone. Tom stood and gave the aunt a brief explanation, keeping details simple and respectful. The woman nodded repeatedly, holding Mia close and thanking everyone involved. As the crowd slowly dispersed, the station returned to its normal rhythm. People resumed walking, but something had changed inside many of them. They had witnessed a moment of deep connection that would stay with them long after the day ended. Max walked beside Tom again, his step steady, his heart lighter. Mia turned back once more before leaving, looking at Max with gratitude in her eyes. She waved shyly, holding the blue bag tightly against her chest. Max wagged his tail in response, watching until she disappeared into the crowd. The bond they shared would remain, even if their paths never crossed again. After Mia left the station with her aunt, the space felt quieter even though the noise had returned. Tom walked beside Max, guiding him through the crowd as they resumed their patrol. The dog moved normally again, yet something about his posture showed that the moment had stayed with him. Tom noticed this and kept his pace slow, allowing Max to settle. As they passed the same bench where the blue bag had rested, Max glanced at it briefly before looking away. Tom felt a strange pull in his chest, realizing how close they had come to missing something important. He thought about how easily moments like that could be ignored in a busy place. The station had almost swallowed the pain of a child without anyone noticing. Tom led Max to a quiet corner near a window where sunlight poured in. He knelt and rested a hand on Max's shoulder, praising him softly. Max responded by leaning into the touch, his tail moving gently. The bond between them felt stronger than ever, shaped by shared trust and understanding. Later that day, Tom was called into the office to explain the incident. He spoke clearly and honestly, describing how Max had reacted and why he trusted the dog's instincts. The supervisors listened carefully, surprised by the emotional depth of the situation. They agreed that Max's actions showed not only skill but deep awareness. Word of the moment spread quietly among the staff. Some officers stopped by to pat Max and offer kind words. Max accepted the attention calmly, though his eyes searched the room as if expecting to see a small girl again. Tom noticed this and felt a quiet ache, knowing that brief connections could leave lasting marks. Across town, Mia sat in a small waiting room beside her aunt, holding the blue bag on her lap. She opened it again, checking each item as if to reassure herself that they were still there. Her breathing was calmer now, and the heavy fear that had followed her all morning began to fade. Still, her thoughts kept returning to the dog who had understood her without a single word. Mia told her aunt about Max in a soft voice, describing his eyes and how he stayed with her. Her aunt listened closely, wiping her own tears as she realized how close Mia had come to losing the last pieces of comfort she had left. The story made the day feel less frightening and more hopeful. It reminded them both that kindness could appear when it was needed most. That evening, Tom finished his shift and prepared to leave the station. He checked on Max one last time, making sure he was comfortable and calm. As Tom turned to go, Max stood and walked toward him, pressing his head gently against Tom's side. The silent gesture said more than words ever could. On the way home, Tom reflected on his years of service and all the moments he thought he understood his job completely. That day had shown him something deeper, something beyond rules and routines. It reminded him that protection was not only about preventing harm but also about recognizing pain. Max had done both without hesitation. The next morning, Tom returned to work early. Max greeted him with his usual excitement, ready for the day ahead. Yet as they walked through the station again, Max's senses seemed sharper, his awareness deeper. He moved with purpose, alert not only to danger but to emotion. As the hours passed, Max paused occasionally, watching people closely. He seemed especially attentive to children and those who looked lost or tired. Tom noticed this change and trusted it. He realized that Max had learned something new from the experience, something no training session could provide. Meanwhile, Mia and her aunt prepared to continue their journey. Before leaving town, Mia asked if they could stop by the station again. Her aunt hesitated but agreed, sensing it mattered deeply to the child. When they arrived, Mia clutched the blue bag tightly, her heart racing. They entered the station quietly, looking around until Mia spotted Max near the same window as before. Her face lit up, and she let out a small sound of recognition. Max turned his head at that exact moment, as if he had felt her presence before seeing her. His tail began to wag slowly. Tom noticed Mia first and felt a wave of surprise and warmth. He knelt beside Max as Mia approached carefully. This time, she did not cry. She smiled, holding the blue bag against her chest, and thanked Tom in a soft voice. Her words were simple but full of meaning. Mia knelt and gently placed the bag on the floor between them. She opened it and took out the small toy, holding it up for Max to see. Max sniffed it gently and wagged his tail, accepting it as part of her story. The moment felt calm and complete. Mia told Max goodbye, explaining that she was going somewhere new but would never forget him. Max listened quietly, his eyes warm and steady. Tom watched closely, understanding that this farewell mattered as much as the first meeting. It allowed both sides to let go with peace. When Mia stood to leave, Max did not block her or cry. He simply watched as she walked away, his posture relaxed. Tom placed a hand on Max's back, proud of him in a way that went beyond duty. They had both grown from the experience. As Mia disappeared into the crowd, she turned once more and waved. Max wagged his tail in response, then turned back to Tom. The station continued its endless movement, but something within it had shifted. A quiet lesson had passed through its walls. That day stayed with Tom and Max long after it ended. It reminded them that even in the busiest places, small acts of understanding could change lives. The blue bag, once forgotten on the floor, had carried more than objects. It had carried memory, loss, and hope, and it had brought strangers together in a moment that would never be forgotten. The days that followed returned to a steady rhythm at the station, yet something quiet and meaningful lingered in the air. Tom noticed it in the way people smiled more often and paused to look around instead of rushing past. Max walked beside him with calm confidence, his steps steady and his senses open. The station was the same place, but it felt warmer than before. Tom often thought about the blue bag and the little girl who carried it like a piece of her heart. He realized that some moments stayed with a person not because they were loud or dramatic but because they were honest. Max seemed to understand this as well. He moved through each shift with patience, watching not only for trouble but for emotion. One afternoon, Tom and Max were assigned to the main hall again. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Max paused briefly near the bench where everything had begun, then continued forward without hesitation. Tom smiled softly, knowing that the memory no longer carried pain but understanding. Elsewhere, Mia settled into her new routine with her aunt. The days were not easy, but they were calmer. Each night before sleep, Mia opened the blue bag and checked its contents, making sure everything was still there. The toy rested near her pillow, and the blanket was folded carefully at the foot of her bed. Mia spoke often about Max, telling her aunt how the dog had cried and stayed close when she felt alone. The story became a source of comfort for her. It reminded her that even when life felt uncertain, kindness could still appear. The memory gave her strength when she needed it most. One evening, Mia decided to write a small note. Her aunt helped her with the words, keeping them simple and clear. Mia wanted to thank the dog and the officer who had helped her. She folded the note carefully and placed it inside the blue bag, knowing it might never be delivered but feeling better for writing it. Back at the station, Tom received a message from a colleague about a letter that had arrived. He was surprised when he opened it and found Mia's note inside. The words were short and sincere, filled with gratitude and warmth. Tom read it twice, feeling a quiet emotion rise in his chest. Tom knelt beside Max and read the note out loud. Max listened, his ears gently tilted, as if recognizing the voice behind the words. When Tom finished, Max wagged his tail slowly and leaned closer. The bond between them felt deeper, strengthened by a shared understanding of what that day had meant. Tom placed the note in his locker, knowing he would keep it for a long time. It reminded him why listening mattered and why trust was so important. Max returned to his duties, calm and focused, carrying the lesson forward in his own way. As weeks passed, the story of the crying police dog quietly spread beyond the station. People spoke about it not as a dramatic event, but as a moment of pure connection. Some visitors asked about Max, and Tom shared the story gently, always respecting the privacy of the child involved. Each retelling carried the same simple message. Max continued to serve with loyalty and care. He seemed more patient with children and more aware of those who looked lost or overwhelmed. Tom trusted Max completely, knowing his partner had a rare gift. Together, they formed a team built not only on training but on empathy. Mia grew stronger with each passing day. She started school in a new place and made friends who made her laugh. The blue bag stayed close, but it no longer felt like the only thing holding her together. Instead, it became a reminder of resilience and hope. One morning, Mia looked at the blue bag and smiled. She realized she no longer needed to open it every day to feel safe. The memory of Max and the station had settled inside her, giving her comfort that could not be lost. She closed the bag and placed it neatly under her bed. Back at the station, Tom and Max ended another shift together. As they walked toward the exit, Max glanced back once more at the busy hall. There was no sadness in his eyes, only calm acceptance. Tom placed a hand on Max's back, proud of the dog who had taught him so much. The station lights dimmed as evening approached. People continued to come and go, each carrying their own stories. Among them were moments of fear, hope, loss, and kindness. Some moments passed unnoticed, but others changed lives forever. The day Max refused to let go of a bag became one of those moments. It showed that understanding did not always need words. Sometimes, all it took was presence, patience, and heart. Tom locked up and headed home, feeling a quiet peace settle over him. Max walked beside him, calm and content. They had protected more than a place that day. They had protected a memory, a child, and a small piece of hope. Far away, Mia drifted to sleep holding her toy, her breathing steady and calm. The world felt a little safer than it had before. She knew that even in crowded places, someone might notice and care. The story did not end with a loud conclusion or grand reward. It ended softly, with lives continuing forward, shaped by a single act of compassion. And that was enough.